Hello everyone. So I want to make this video, which is going to be a little bit more philosophical than the others, but hopefully it can be useful to discuss what is, I wouldn't say in my opinion, it's more, we are going to do a reasoning together. So hopefully it will make sense to everyone. But what is, let's say, our true identity? So it is a very deep and tricky philosophical question. But let's start first what identity is not. And this is something that I addressed in a previous video, which is called identity attachment, where basically most people confuse their identity with stories. So stories about what they are or what they should be. So the kind of story identity that we get attached to, like I'm a great person, or I'm special, or I'm this, or I'm that, I'm a hero, I'm whatever. And then they fight for those stories. They get trapped in those stories. They fight for those stories. They feel they have to defend those stories. So this is, let's say, the false identity or the story identity or the imagined identity. It's the identity that is a story that we make in our imagination. And of course, when we realize that it's just a story, then the story drops. And that's it. We don't feel like we have to defend anything. We don't have to prove anything to anyone. We don't have to validate our identity or the story of our identity by doing certain things or looking for approval from other people or even from ourselves. We don't need to prove anything to anyone, including ourselves, because we realize that those ideas were just stories in our mind. And again, they're just stories. So once we realize they are stories, they lose all their power. And I invite you guys to watch the video about identity and story and how we get attached to those stories, that those stories about identity are the real attachment. This is the attachment that really matters, and that's what a lot of, let's say, spiritual gurus do not understand. They think that it's about attachment to certain things, but in reality, it's about being attached to a story about our identity. So let's say you renounce certain things, but in reality, it's because you're telling yourself a story that you are a good person, you are a better person, you're a more spiritual person, you blah, 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 because you renounce those things. So yes, they may be not an attachment to material things, whatever that means, but it's because there is a deep attachment to an idea, a story about an identity that they want to protect at all costs. And this is actually the true attachment that is quite distortive and damaging. But let's look then at, so if we understand what identity is not, then the question is, what is identity? So what are we? So we could, some people could say that we are our body. Some people could believe that there is something else, like they would say a soul, or whatever they want to call it. It's not even clear what a soul is. Is it like a little ghost that inhabits the body? Is it ourself existing in another dimension? We really have no idea. So I don't think it's interesting to just speculate on things that cannot be verified. It doesn't really make sense. It can be interesting to think about possibilities, so to say it could be this, it could be that. But I think it's better to try to do maybe a more rigorous reasoning where we define the premises and we just go forward in logical steps. So, in my opinion, and of course I'm going to explain and defend what I'm saying, and not just say that it's my opinion, I'm going to follow a maybe not so rigorous, but hopefully as rigorous as possible path in trying to explain what I think identity actually is. So let's assume there is a reality, and actually let's define reality. So, because all we know for sure is that we are experiencing something. Now we don't know what it is. Could be a dream, could be a simulation, could be real, whatever that means. We have no idea. And what I'm arguing is that it doesn't matter. We don't need to find, let's say, the ultimate whatever, especially because it's actually probably impossible. Because let's say that this is a dream or it's a simulation. I mean, while you're in the dream, the only way to realize that it is a dream is to wake up from the dream. But until you're dreaming, you don't know it's a dream. You know it's a dream when you wake up. But once you wake up, how do you know you didn't just dream to wake up and you're actually in the reality? You don't know. Or how do you know it's not a simulation? And even if it was a simulation and you exit the simulation, how do you know the next one is not also a simulation? So in some way you realize that something was not reality only once you live it. But let's say that you are in some kind of ultimate reality. You now inhabit the ultimate reality. How do you know? All you know is that so far you have not yet awakened from that ultimate reality in another more ultimate reality. So in some way you never know if you inhabit what we could call the ultimate reality, because you could at any point wake up from that reality and appear in a more ultimate reality. But let's say, yeah, of course, the characteristic is that once you're in the ultimate reality, there will be no more waking up into a bigger reality. But how do you know? Because maybe you stay in that ultimate reality for 1 billion years and you're sure it's the ultimate one, and then poof, you suddenly wake up. So there is no way to know for sure. I mean, of course, once you wake up from a reality, whether it's a dream or a simulation or whatever, you know that the previous one was false. But you never know if the new one is real. So if there was such a thing as an absolute or ultimate reality, you will never know if you're in it or not. So that's the first point I want to make. So let's try to define reality. So my argument is that reality, instead of trying to define it in a complicated way, because we don't know what is reality. I mean, we don't know what it's made of. Of course, science brings us up to a certain point, but maybe in the next 100 years, science will discover a lot more stuff. And maybe it's all a big simulation. So all the stuff we are discovering about the laws of physics, maybe it's just some algorithm written by some very smart developer in some alien planet. I mean, we don't know. So I think there is no point trying to define reality from an absolute perspective, but it's better to define reality from a relative perspective, that is, from our experiential perspective. So how do we define reality from our experiential perspective? I will argue it's very simple, and I will define reality as the experience or the thing you cannot escape from, whatever is inescapable. So let's say you're dreaming. While you're dreaming could very well be reality as far as you know. But then you wake up, so now you know it's not reality. And then let's say you wake up again because actually you didn't really wake up, but you just woke up within a dream. Then again, it was escapable. So, but then if some whatever reality is the ultimate, it is by definition inescapable, because it's not something within something else. So from a perspective of experience, instead of starting from the absolute, I start from the subjective, from the relative. I start from experience, which we know, of course, exists, because we know that we are experiencing something. And even if some people say this is an illusion, it's not real, but that doesn't really mean anything. Because let's say, even if you are just dreaming, in some way, you or something exists. Because for there to be a dream, there has to be a dreamer. So it doesn't matter if reality is real or whatever that means, because I think those are just messy and ambiguous words that means nothing. The point is, for sure, there is an experience. For sure, we are experiencing something. There is no way around this. We are clearly experiencing something. And again, even when you are dreaming, you are experiencing something. So even if the dream is not some kind of ultimate reality or whatever, still you are experiencing the dream, and to experience the dream, there has to be a dreamer. So if you can dream, or if you can experience something, something exists. The experience at least exists. Now, is it real? But what does real means? Because, I mean, we don't know. it probably doesn't mean anything. So we have to define what it means. What does real mean? I will argue the thing you cannot escape from. So you can escape from the dream by waking up, but let's say if this reality is the ultimate reality, then you cannot escape from it. Just because it is the actual, let's say, bottom reality. It's not contained within a bigger reality. So the dream is contained within a bigger reality, but at some point there could be a reality which is, let's say, the ultimate reality. But you will never know experimentally if it is or not, because you could always wake up from that reality and there could be a bigger reality around it. But let's again try to define it in a simple way, purely from an experimental perspective. So the thing will be, again, reality is the thing you cannot escape from. So now, of course, you never really know if it's the ultimate reality, because maybe after 1 billion years in that reality you escape from it. But we can still define reality as the thing you cannot escape from. So the point I want to make is that it doesn't have to be the ultimate reality. So let's make this distinction clear. So if you are dreaming a dream, but there is just no way from waking up, so you will dream this dream for eternity, then it is effectively reality, because you cannot escape from it. If you are in a simulation and there is just no way you can escape from it, so you will be in that simulation for eternity, that simulation is reality. It doesn't matter if there is a bigger reality outside of it, because you will never be able to access it. So reality is whatever experience you cannot escape from. So now we have a strict definition of what reality is. Instead of starting from the absolute, we start from the relative, we start from the subjective. Reality as the experience you cannot escape from. If it's a dream, but the dream lasts forever, then it is reality, because you cannot escape from it. So this is reality. Now, what is identity? So let's try to think about the lowest common denominator. So the thing that you really, really cannot remove. So is it our body? I mean, maybe, but some people believe in the afterlife. Is it our mind? But some people get Alzheimer. Is it our memory? But some people get amnesia. So what is it? What is the thing that you really cannot remove when it comes to identity? And for sure, it's not the stories, because the stories we tell ourselves about identity, we can drop them easily by realizing they are stories. So that's not what identity is. So what is identity? So Buddha say about what is not, use the word the self. So he say, this is not the self, this is not the self, this is not the self. But he doesn't say what the self is, and maybe for a good reason, because it's a very difficult question. But I think we can approximate an answer by saying that maybe identity is kind of a relative reality or a sub-reality, and I will say it's a point of view on reality. So let's say I'm in a hotel room right now, and there is this camera. So let's say the hotel room is the reality, and this camera is the point of view. Now, if I want to take a picture or to make a video of this room, I have to pick a specific point of view. I cannot just take a picture without a point of view. And there is potentially an infinite number of point of views for this room. I could position the camera in billions and billions of possible angles and combinations. So the point of view is kind of essential to perceive. So if I want to perceive this room, I need a point of view. The point of view is really just an angle, the angle from which I'm going to look at reality. So I have to put the camera in a specific position to capture a specific point of view. I cannot observe the room without a point of view. Even if I put it on the roof and I get the full view, I mean on the ceiling, and I get the full view, it's still a point of view. It's the point of view from the ceiling. I could also put it on the floor and I will get the point of view from the floor. So if I want to perceive, or let's say even to experience this room with the camera, I need to pick a point of view. And there can be an infinite number of points of view. So identity, the minimum common denominator, the thing we may not be able to remove from identity. So we can remove the body, the ideas, the stories, the memories, whatever. But we cannot remove the point of view. So we could say that there is reality, and reality is whatever we cannot escape from for any infinite amount of time. So that's, again, if a dream is infinite, then it is reality. So reality is whatever we cannot escape from. And then identity will be a point of view over reality. So a specific angle. So in that case, to perceive reality, to perceive the world, you need eyes and ears and a nose and a mouth and hands, whatever. You have to perceive, because you need something to perceive, let's say, the light of the sun and the sound of the birds and whatever. So it's kind of like maybe every person, every animal, every form of life is potentially a point of view. You need the point of view to perceive, let's say, the earth. It's not that the earth is going to perceive itself. You need, let's say, those animals that have sensory input, like the eyes, the ears, etc., which are a point of view over this reality to perceive this reality. So the reality is whatever we cannot escape from, and the identity would be a specific point of view over reality. But the key is that just like reality is whatever we cannot escape from, identity will be the point of view we cannot escape from. So I cannot see the earth from your point of view. I cannot switch and see from someone else's point of view. I will always see it from my point of view. And even if there is an afterlife, then I will see it from the point of view of my soul or my spirit or whatever. But I will always see reality from this point of view. I cannot escape this point of view. So we could argue that reality is whatever you cannot escape from, and identity is the point of view on that reality that allows to observe that reality that you also cannot escape from. But there is also a detail to add. So I will say this, I have to add a little piece. So there is experience, which is objective. I mean, it's effectively what we can experience, what we can perceive, what we are actually experiencing. Doesn't matter if it's real or not. So experience is what we are experiencing. Then, but there is also some part that we do not experience. So, for example, let's say I'm in this hotel room and I'm looking at the camera and I'm looking at, let's say I'm looking at a window and I don't see a door. So we could say that the door is not part of experience. But does that mean that it's not real? Does that mean that it does not exist? Well, so if it did not exist, and let's say it will only appear when I turn my head, let's say as soon as I turn my head it appears, but it doesn't exist before, that there will be a very high risk of incoherence. So it's like, let's say I could be looking at the window and I don't see the door because I'm not looking in the direction of the door, and then suddenly I turn my head behind and there is no door. Now that's very incoherent, because if there is no door, then I could ask myself the question, how did I enter this room? And then we have a huge incoherence, it doesn't make sense. But because this never happens and reality is coherent, most likely it's not that there is just what we experience and that's it, which by the way will be a story, I believe. Why would it be that? Of course we know that what we experience is there because we are experiencing it, but why would we now build a story that this is the only thing that exists? I mean, that would be a new story, a new belief. Why would we add that is the only thing that exists? So there are clearly other things that exist, because if they didn't exist, there would be a huge risk of incoherence. So if nothing but experience, that is whatever I perceive now, would exist, let's say I'm looking at the window and then I turn my head and there could very well be no door, because if there was nothing but experience, it will be that as I turn my head, whatever is there gets generated like real time. And so there could very well be no door. But if there is no door, then it will be incoherent. So the fact that there is a door has to be stored somewhere. And we can call that, let's say, the non-visible part of reality. But the key is that this invisible part of reality is simply future experience. So we have present experience, which is what we are experiencing now, and then we have a part that is hidden, which one call an extra part of reality. So the part of reality, so let's say reality will incorporate what we are experiencing plus what is hidden from experience, but is already pre-existing. And that part that is hidden will eventually unfold into future experience. So, because what will never be experienced like ever, it's as if it does not exist. It's kind of irrelevant. So something that will never be experienced ever, it's as if it doesn't exist. So there is current experience, then so let's say reality is the sum of the current experience plus the invisible part, let's say, or the reality part, that the non-visible part that is still, but that will become experience eventually. So in some way you have current experience, future experience, but in the present you have something that contains, let's say, information about future experience, so that future experience is coherent. So if I'm looking at the window, somewhere there is also some extra bit of reality, and not just what I'm experiencing right now, that say that there is a door in this room, so that when I turn my head, there will be a door, and so reality is coherent. And so when I turn my head, that's future experience, and so that thing was real because it became future experience. So, and whatever will never become future experience, it's as if it does not exist because it's not relevant. It will have no influence on our experience. So again, reality, the thing you cannot escape from, but to experience reality, you need a perspective. And the perspective you cannot escape from is identity, in my opinion. So, but that identity doesn't have any specific characteristics, so it has nothing to do, there is no identity that is better or worse. There is no identity that is good or bad. It's like, it's just a point of view. It's a point of view that goes through the body of an animal, in our case, human. But I mean, probably it's the same for the other animals, so they also have their point of view on reality. So the identity will be our inescapable point of view. So of course it exists. It's kind of ridiculous when the spiritual teachers say there is no identity or you are just one. We are not just one, because clearly I rather, let's say, if someone has to hit me with a hammer on my head, I rather that someone else gets hit than me. It's not equivalent. And people that say the opposite are just lying, because or clearly they would rather that someone else gets sick than they get sick. They would probably rather that someone else die than they die, unless they tell themselves a story that they are some kind of martyr or whatever, but then that's because of a story. But clearly you would rather that, unless you're telling yourself a story that you are some kind of hero or martyr, you would probably rather that someone else experience the pain than you. So you know very well that it's different, that your point of view and someone else's point of view is not the same. So trying to build a new story, a new belief that, oh, it's all the same and we are all one, is just a new story. It's just a new made up belief that is absolutely based on nothing. So clearly we have a unique point of view. Now, of course, then we build a lot of stories about how this point of view is unique, it's better, it's more special, is whatever. And those are just stories that we can easily drop once we understand their stories. But remain the fact that this point of view exists. We are in an inescapable point of view. So reality is whatever cannot be escaped from. But then within that reality, we have a specific perspective and point of view that we also cannot escape from. Because I cannot switch my point of view with one of you guys. So identity is also the point of view we cannot escape from. So it kind of becomes our reality, because if we cannot escape from that point of view, then it kind of becomes our reality. So maybe there is a main reality which contains many points of view. So there is a main reality which is inescapable, and then there are many points of view in that inescapable reality which are themselves unescapable. And so there are just an infinite number of, let's say, sub-realities that are inescapable identities. But really, an inescapable identity is kind of a reality. So this point of view is my reality, because I cannot escape from this point of view, so it effectively becomes reality. So just like reality is whatever is inescapable in general, but then reality has many points of view, but we cannot escape our point of view, so our point of view becomes our reality. So what is our identity? Effectively, our identity is our reality. And again, it doesn't matter if there is life after death or not. It's kind of irrelevant, because even if you die and you believe that there is going to be a soul, well, that soul is going to experience something, and that's going to be your reality. So your reality is your identity. But without the stories, without the bells and whistles, without all the you are great, you're not great, you're a success, you're a failure, this is just what's happening. So let's make a distinction between the inescapable reality of our point of view and what's happening. It's kind of like the TV and the movie that is being played. That's not necessarily a good metaphor, but I think it can give the idea. So what's happening is not the same as the point of view. So our reality, our identity, which I think is the same, is this inescapable point of view which we have over some bigger inescapable experience, which is what we call reality. But then what happens in that reality is not the reality. So the reality is just the point of view. Our identity, our reality is that point of view that we cannot escape from. But that's it. Whatever is happening in that reality is not the reality, it's just what is happening within the reality. So if we are young or old, healthy or sick, we are currently doing well or we are doing poorly, we are happy or we are sad, we are alive or we are dead, assuming there is an afterlife. Those things don't matter. It's just what is happening in the reality. That is what we are experiencing. What we are experiencing through this point of view we cannot escape from. And that experience always changes. We grow older, things happen, we learn. Sometimes we have an accident, we get sick, we heal again, like lots of things happen. So the experience is always different. But the point of view is inescapable. So because it's my point of view is not going to switch with any of you guys. So my point of view is my reality, your point of view is your reality. But within that reality, the experience can change completely. Going from being a baby to being an old man, the experience is completely different, but it's still the same point of view. And even if one dies and there is something after life, then I will experience being some soul, and you guys will experience being a different soul. So there will be a difference in the point of view. So the point of view, the reality is our point of view. And our point of view, because we cannot escape it, is our reality. But it doesn't have any special connotation, any special, quality. Because anything can happen within that reality. We can be born, we can die, we can grow old, we can get sick, we can become rich, we can have a big accident, anything can happen. So what happens in that reality, what we experience in that reality, what we experience from that inescapable point of view is not our identity. The identity, so in Buddhism they say that they like the idea of permanence. Whatever is permanent is real. I think permanent is is not really a good word, because it's confusing. What exactly is permanent anyway? And what does impermanent means? It's just the opposite of something that doesn't exist. So permanence doesn't really exist, and impermanence is just the opposite of something that doesn't exist. So why bother with those words or concepts that don't really represent anything real? They are just concepts. I think a much better word is inescapable. So identity is the point of view of reality, which itself becomes a reality because it's inescapable. So it's the inescapable point of view over whatever is also inescapable, which will be reality. But we can just look now at the sub-reality. So identity as a sub-reality because it's inescapable. And that's the closest thing to the idea of identity. But it has no quality, it has no parameters, it has nothing that is permanent, let's say, except the inescapability. So I think a much better word rather than playing with words with permanence, impermanence, which are kind of weird concept, because permanence is something that in actual reality never exists and happens. And so impermanence is just the opposite of the thing that doesn't make sense. So that is, it should be the lack of. So impermanence is not a thing. Permanence is a thing which doesn't exist, and impermanence will just be the lack of the thing that doesn't exist. But it's like saying non-Santa Claus. It's not interesting. So how exactly it helps to say that there is something that doesn't exist, and then say, yeah, but let's say that there is also a word to say the lack of that thing that doesn't exist. Lack of Santa Claus. How is that interesting? More interesting is the idea of inescapable point of view. So identity as this, so we don't have to define what it is in the sense of its nature, because we don't know the ultimate nature of reality, whatever that even means. But we can look at it from the relative perspective. So whatever we cannot escape from is reality. Even if it's a dream, but it will last forever, then it's reality. And identity is just the point of view, the perspective over that reality, and it is itself something that we cannot escape from. So it itself becomes a reality. And I think so our reality, we can say our identity is just our reality. But within that reality, absolutely everything can change. So there is nothing permanent. The only characteristic why it becomes an identity, what makes it our identity, is the fact that it is inescapable.